Hey guys, it's Swell here, doing a quick video update. This is the gearbox that is coming out of the budget build. The one that I told you I would keep you guys updated on what's going on. If you notice, there's nothing in the gun right now. I haven't gotten any new bushings for it yet. But in the meantime, what I decided to do was I'm going to switch the wiring from being wired to the front to being wired to the rear. And also changing the wiring, because the wiring that was in here is not something that I am a fan of. I think this stuff is called silicone wiring, where the insulation is made of the silicone. I do not like this stuff. While it is extremely flexible and offers, from what I can tell, low resistance, this insulation or shielding or whatever you want to call it, the silicone, is not very durable. These things become spliced or cut or just wear out very quickly, and in my experience, they just fail too often and too frequently for me to have any faith in using them. While I'm doing this, I'm also going to tell you guys a little trick. I learned this from a local gun tech, and it has saved me a lot of heartache, a lot of sorrow, and a lot of money over the years. What I'm talking about here is the wiring that I use to wire my guns. Not sure if I can read these, but it is 16 gauge wiring. And I believe it is in-wall speaker wiring for those professional sound systems and surround sound systems that people have built into their houses when they get their houses built. Now, I go to Home Depot and I buy this stuff at 33 cents a foot. So usually I'll buy about 20 to 30 feet at a time, and it lasts me a year. This roll I've had for, I'd say, about 8 months now, and this roll will probably last me a whole nother year as well. This one is a 20-foot roll. Again, it's affordable, and it gets the job done. Is it the least resistive wiring on the market? Doubtful. It's just speaker wire. But for what I need it for, it works great. I just cut that so you guys can see. It comes with 2 leads, and you can get it with 4 leads as well. You can also find it just like this with 22 gauge, which I use for my MOSFET installs. I'm not doing a MOSFET install on this gun as of right now, though I do have one. I'm not sure I want to put it on this gun because this gun is going to be a DMR type setup. So I'm not sure what I want to do as far as that is concerned, but switching it out later and adding a MOSFET is just 20 minutes of work for me. Alright. Let me just give you guys a quick brief rundown of how things were set up on this gun. The positive wire, runs down the front side of the lower portion of the gearbox that leads to the motor. Well, that wire, this first portion of the wire, is soldered in to the lower tab on the switch assembly, as seen here. And I'm sorry I can't get any closer, guys. This is as far as my camera will zoom while on the tripod. This is the best angle I can get for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wire it to the rear using the wiring I just talked about briefly from Home Depot. But before doing that, I have to prep the gearbox, or at least prep these pads, these tabs, to accept the new wiring that's coming in. When I desoldered the first set of wiring, a lot of the solder came off with it. For my soldering, I use a very inexpensive, we have a surplus store that sells soldering irons in 30 watts, 40 watt, and 60 watt soldering irons, and they're $6.95 a piece. I usually buy the 40 watt. I also keep a 30 watt and I also keep a 60 watt on hand just in case I have to do something that requires extremely high heat. But the solder that I use doesn't have a high melting temp, so this 40 watt works, and it has worked on every gun that I've worked on so far, and also the Dean's plugs that I use. I will do a tutorial on installing those as well. But what you want to do is you tin the tip of your soldering iron, which is basically adding some solder to the tip, and then you add it to the tab. Just that simple. By adding the solder now, it helps make things go a lot smoother and a lot quicker when you go to put the wiring in. And I'll show you that later, because I'm also going to add solder to the tip of the wiring. It doesn't take too much time to get this solder where it needs to be, or enough of it. Now on the tabs, you see that tab here, tab there, I just added a little bit of solder, and that is going to be perfect for when I'm ready to attach the wiring. Okay guys, this next step, I'm going to add a little bit of solder to the tip of the wire. And as you can see here, this one is a black wire, so this will be my negative lead. Again, it doesn't take a lot of time to heat it up, and if the wiring is any good, it will suck that solder right in, or absorb it. These helping hands came from the surplus store as well. They were about $4, and they do help. They're worth about $1 million. When you're doing projects as often as I am, these things come in handy, quite handy. Here we are doing the positive wire. Add solder to one more positive lead. For those of you that don't have experience wiring AEGs, I will show you why. There are 2 positives and only 1 negative wire. Okay, we're going to take the shorter of the 2 positive wires that you cut, and you're going to lay it down in its channel here. And this is the shorter one that's going to go to the motor. And the reason why I do it this way is because by running it in the channel right now, it's actually holding the wire in place better than I could with either my finger or a tool, because the area is so tight. I am going to try and do this so that you guys can see what I'm doing on camera. Again, I would almost be done by now if I wasn't recording this. The tripod is in the way, making it extremely awkward to work with the wiring. But anything for you guys. Now you see that I put the solder on the tab already, and I put solder on the wiring. Just a little bit of heat and they will both come together. If you've not worked with solder together before, you'll find that when it is heated enough and liquefied, that it kind of like comes together on its own. Done. Alright, we've wired the bottom wire in. Now we're going to do the top one for the trigger assembly. Again, we're going to run this. We're going to try and run this through the channel after lining it up with the tab. Run it through the channel. Run it through where you're going to have it running when the gun is put together. Again, this makes things a little bit easier, as well as when you're sizing everything up, when you cut everything, when you're doing everything that needs to be done. All of it is where it's supposed to be, so it's not really a guessing game. Okay, now I'm putting this tab in right now to hold the wire in place as much as possible. And actually, to make things a little bit easier, that first wire that I soldered in, I can actually put it into the channel and it will hold that second wire in place for me as well. See how that is? Right where it needs to be. Just make sure you guys are focused. Again, I apologize if it does come out of focus or it's not where it's supposed to be and you're having a hard time seeing. Like I said, this is very awkward. So the wire is actually where it needs to be. You want to heat that solder up. And again, once it liquefies, they're going to join. And you may find in some situations you have to add a little bit of extra solder. I don't think I need to, but I'm going to, just to make sure there is enough. All right. Perfect. Nice and clean. Okay. Now, this is something that I do when I do a wiring. I make sure that when I did solder the wiring, based on the angle and how the wire is in there, that the trigger assembly is going to have the clearance that is necessary to function. And we have the clearance. That looks great. Wire is not in the way. That part is done. So the positive wires are in place. Now for some builds, some people take some crazy glue, Loctite, or things like that. At least that's how I was taught by one of the technicians here who helped tutor me through the gearbox build. He would drop a dab of crazy glue down here to hold the wire in place and a little bit here to hold these two wires in place. I've come to the conclusion, or I've stepped away from doing that, only because I go into guns quite often, and when I do go into them, if I have to move the wires, if I have to do anything with the wires, that usually means I have to do a complete rewire in order to move anything around, because when that glue is in there and it gets a hold of this insulation, when you move it, it tears it and it's useless, so you have to do it all over again. Once the bushings come in, I will re-shim the gun, put the JG gears in, put in the piston, the cylinder head, the spring guide, and go through the hop-up build and final complete build of the gun. Once you guys see that, I give it about another month and this gun will be complete. Well, it will be complete by the end of August. Let's put it that way. I will have it done. I have all of the parts here except the bushings. So this is Schwell. I hope you guys are out there having fun, being safe, being responsible, and I really hope this video came out good enough to be helpful to you guys. I'll hit you with the two fingers. Later.